So in previous videos, we've talked about setting up OpenSSH server, and we've talked about how useful it is because it allows us to SSH or to connect to a remote device and manage it basically just like we're sitting at the console. So it's great because it allows us to sit at our desk and manage our servers remotely without having to get up and walk to where they're at. So it's something we probably want on most of our servers, and we'll talk about securing it a little bit later on. So let's start by determining if it's installed or not. So the command is which SSHD, and the which will tell us if a particular command is installed and where it's located at. So you'll see that we have user sbin SSHD. That's where SSHD is currently located. So we know it's installed. The next thing we need to do is check on the status of it. So we'll do that using the command systemctl, system control, and I want to look at the status of my SSH. And here it is, the SSH service is running OpenBSD Secure Shell Server. It's loaded, and you'll notice as you look across there, you'll see that it's enabled, and then it is active. Now, if this wasn't active, then we could do systemctl start SSH. If it wasn't enabled, then we could do systemctl enable SSH and then start it. But we should get to the point where this is what it looks like. And in green, it says active and running. That means we should be able to use it, which is great. Now, the other thing is SSH by default, OpenSSH will listen on port 22. You can change that to a different port number. We'll talk about that later on. You can change that to a different port number to hopefully make it a little more secure, because everyone knows SSH runs on port 22 by default. Now, you'll notice here in the logs, it says it's listening on port 22. But if we've had more log entries show up, we might not see that. So we want to see if we're actually listening on port 22, or what port we're listening on. So the command we're going to use is ss, which will show us active connections. And I'm going to do a series of options here, -tunlp. Now, this is T is TCP, so show me TCP connections, show me UDP connections, give it to me numerically, show me listening ones, and tell me the process that's actually in charge of that. So we run this, you'll see we have TCP. We've got a couple of them, 0000 colon, and you'll, under local address port, it's at fifth column over, 0000 colon 22. That means it's listening on anything IPv4 on port 22, and then the one down below that is anything on IPv6 port 22. So we'll listen on every address that we have on our system. If you have multiple IP addresses, you might want to actually filter that down a little bit. And you can specify which IP address it's listening on. But for the moment, we're going to leave it the way it is. Now, notice it doesn't show me the process. And the reason it doesn't show me the process is because in order to see that, I have to run sudo to do it. So a double exclamation point is going to repeat the previous command. And now you'll see that we have processes identified. And you'll see here my process is SSH. And process ID, or it's the SSHD process ID 824. Okay, so now I know it's working. So now I want to connect to it. And here's how we're going to do it. Now I have this system running at 10.1.1.10. I have another system running at 10. My numlock key is off. 10.1.1.11. And you'll see that that's currently responding. So I'm going to try to SSH to that system. So the command is going to be SSH space, and this is where it gets interesting, because if I just do SSH space the IP address, 10.1.1.11, it will try to connect me using my username. If I want to specify a different username, then I can put my username, in this case I've got the same name, but David at. And then if I wanted to use a different port number, I'd use I use the -p and specify the port number. So I'm not going to use a different port number. So I'm going to SSH to, and notice, by the way, I'm running on David at demo. So the authenticity of the host can't be established just because I'm not using certificates at this point. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I do. And warning, permanently added 10.1.1.11 to the list of known hosts. And look, I am now David at 10.1.1.11. Now, I could have used the host name as well if I'd set up name resolution for that, which I haven't yet, which is why I use the IP address. So now I am on that system, and anything I do on that system, or anything I type now, should go to that. Oh, help if I put in the password. Duh. Let me error out so I can retype my password correctly. There we go. Trying to issue commands without putting in my password. There we go. All right, David at test. Perfect. Okay, and now you'll see we've created a new session here. Welcome to Ubuntu and all of this good information. 13 updates can be applied immediately. Last login, system restart is required. All right, and so now I can do whatever I want to on that system. And since that restart is required, I'm going to go ahead and do sudo and reboot. And once my connection closes, you'll see I go from David at test back to David at demo. So that was real quick and easy. I just use the SSH command, and that'll start my SSH client. I set the port number, the username, and the device that I'm trying to connect to. Now, you can secure SSH a little bit more by using public and private keys. And there are ways to simplify your connection to SSH devices. But this should give you your first introduction as to how to use SSH to connect to and manage remote systems.